Have you ever asked someone, are you sure you are okay, even after they already said yes? Have you reread a message 5 times trying to detect whether the full stop sounded cold? Have you checked whether someone's typing pattern changed? Have you felt your stomach tighten because someone took longer than usual to reply? And the strangest part, a rational part of you knows nothing may actually be wrong, and yet your emotional world feel like an alarm is going off. That's what we are going to talk about today. Why some of us need reassurance not once but repeatedly, not because we are weak, not because we are dramatic, but because somewhere the mind learned that uncertainty might be dangerous. And so it keeps asking, are we okay? Am I okay? Or did something changes? As a therapist, I can tell you this with great honesty. This is one of the most human things I see. Not just in client with anxiety, not just in relationship, but in friendships, at work, between parent and children, even spiritually. The need for reassurance is rarely about the question being asked. It, it's about what the nervous system is trying to survive. Hello, and welcome back to From the Therapy Room Psychology of Mind and Body, understanding how we think, feel, pattern, and become. I'm your host, Jyoti, a clinical counseling psychotherapist. I'm really glad you're here. You're welcome to follow this space and stay connected. This is a space where we gently explore the inner landscape of the human mind, where psychology meets lived experiences, and where the stories we carry inside finally find language. In this podcast, we explore the psychology behind everyday emotional experiences, the things we often struggle to understand within ourselves. Go back to our today's topic. Have you ever done this? You send a message, then you look at it again, then again, and suddenly you're no longer reading your own words. You're studying them. Did that sound weird? Was that too much, too cold, too eager? Did I just said something wrong? And then the waiting begins 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes. And now your mind has quietly built an entire emotional courtroom. Maybe they're upset. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they have started seeing me differently. Maybe they are pulling away. It's fascinating, almost painfully fascinating is this. A part of you know this might not be true. A rational, adult, intelligent part of you knows. People gets busy, phone die, meeting happens, life happens, and yet your body does not believe that logic. Your chest tightens, your stomach drop, your thoughts become noisy, your attention narrows, and suddenly the question arrives. Should I just ask? Are you okay? Did I upset you? Is everything all right between us? And maybe they reassure you. No, everything is fine. There's a relief, a deep breath, calm, and then 2 hours later. But what if they only said that to be polite? And the cycles begin again. If this is you, I want you to know something immediately. This conversation is not about weakness, it's not about being too much, it's not about being dramatic, it's not about lacking intelligence. Some of the most insightful, capable, and emotionally aware human beings I have worked with do this: doctors, leaders, therapists, professionals, parent, partners, function beautifully in public and privately unravel over a delayed text. Because reassurance seeking is rarely about the present moment alone, very often. It is an old emotional language speaking through a modern situation. And today we are going to walk into that world together. Because if you have ever wondered Why do I need so much reassurance even when logically I know everything is probably okay? This episode is certainly for you. Sitting with a client, let's call her Ria. Bright, articulate, successful, highly self aware. The kind of person people assume has it all together. She sat across from me and said, I feel ridiculous even saying this. And I smiled because as a therapist, we learn something important whenever someone says, this sounds ridiculous. Something profoundly human is usually about to emerge. So I asked, go on. And she said, my partner texted me good night. I waited. She continued, that's it? But it felt different. I asked, different how? Shorter? Again, there was a silence. And she said, or less warm? I don't know, colder? And then she said, I spent 3 hours thinking about it, 3 hours, not because anything objectively happened, but because emotionally something happened. And this is where people often become cruel to themselves because the next thing she said was, sounds irrational. And I asked her a question that changed the room. When did small emotional shifts first become important in our life? And there was a silence. The kind of silence that tells you something ancient just got touched. Her face changed. Her voice softened, and she said, my mother. She used to go quiet when upset. No one explained anything. I had to figure out what I had done. And suddenly, we were no longer talking about text message. We were talking about emotional survival. Do you see this? The adult mind says, it's just a short message. But the emotional nervous system says, pay attention. Silence can mean danger. This is how the past lives in the present, not as a memory alone, but as emotional expectations. Let's try to understand something important here. People often simplify reassurance seeking. They say things like, you just need validation, you are insecure, or stop overthinking, or be confident. But psychologically, this is far more nuanced. So reassurance can be many things. Sometimes reassurance is anxiety regulation. Your nervous system feels activated. Reassurance become a sedative. Reassurance sometimes is attachment repair. You're not asking for information, you're asking, are we still emotionally connected? And sometimes reassurance is certainty seeking because ambiguity feels unbearable. So you want clarity because uncertainty feels unsafe. And sometimes reassurance is trauma adaptation. Your mind learn unpredictably equal danger, so you scan for signs. Sometimes reassurance is self-worth outsourcing. Instead of internally knowing your value, you seek external emotional confirmation. And sometimes it is simply deeply human co-regulation. Because humans were never designed to regulate emotion in complete isolation. So the problem is not needing reassurance sometime because healthy human seeks reassurance. Children do, partners do, friends do, even secure adults do. So the question is, when does reassurance become a pattern? When does it become chronic, compulsive? It becomes emotionally exhausting because that's where deeper psychological work begins. The most misunderstood parts of the reassurance seeking is this. People think it starts in thought. It often is in the body. Let me explain here. A message is delayed. A tone feels different, someone seems distracted, and before a conscious thought forms, your body reacts. Chest tightens, jaw tension, restlessness, heart rate changes, stomach discomfort, hyperfocus. That is nervous system activation. Then the mind arrives afterwards to explain the feeling. And what does the mind do? It creates stories. Something is wrong. They are upset. I'm losing them, or I made a mistake. This is why big logic often fails, because reassurance seeking isn't always a thinking problem. It can be a physiological alarm response. The body says danger, the mind says let me find evidence. This is how overthinking become emotional defective work. I still remember, I would like to share a somehow sort of mini therapy room kind of moment. I still remember a male client once laughed while describing this to me. He said something that my wife can literally just say okay instead of say okay, smiley. And I suddenly think our marriage is ending. We both laughed because humor helps. Then I asked, what does okay means emotionally to your nervous system? He got quiet and then said, withdrawal. That's the work, not the word, the meaning beneath the word. Then people feel ashamed of reassurance seeking. They say, I'm educated, I understand psychology, I know I'm catastrophizing. So why can't I stop? Because emotional pattern is not solved by information alone. Insight does not automatically regulate attachment to wounds, or knowing your nervous system is activated enough, or sorry, activated does not instantly deactivate it. You can intellectually understand your pattern and still emotionally feel them. This is not hypocrisy, this is it's humanity. In fact, some highly intelligent people overthink even more because intelligence gives anxiety better tools. Now, instead of simply worrying, you build elegant psychological argument for your fear. You become convincing even to yourself. Like uh, they usually reply in 20 minutes. It has been an hour. Or last week they sounded enthusiastic. Today less so. I noticed punctuation changed, or maybe emotional investment is shifting. See, it sounds analytical, but underneath it may simply be fear. Because reassurance seeking rarely appears in dramatic scenes first. It lives in tiny moments. Let's make the pain this painfully relatable. You reread a message multiple times. You analyze emoji use. You compare today's tone with yesterday's tone. And you ask, are you sure you're okay? More than once. You feel disturbed when someone feels slightly distant. You repeatedly check if someone has been seen your message. You revisit conversation mentally, and you mentally rehearse what you might have done wrong. You need repeated confirmation. You ask, do you still love me? Are we okay? Did I upset you? And maybe no one around you fully understands the internal distress, because outwardly it looks small, inwardly it feels enormous. And this mismatch creates shame, and shame makes the cycle worse. Let me ask you something gently. When someone becomes emotionally distant, now, what happens inside you? Not what you think, what happens inside. Does your chest tighten? Do you become mentally restless, or do you start scanning conversations? Do you suddenly feel an urge to fix something, to reach out, to clarify, to repair, to ask, are we okay? Because if this happens, sometimes the present moment is not the whole story. Sometimes your emotional response is partially shaped by old relational experiences. And this is where attachment psychology become incredibly important. As therapists, we often say children don't learn through explanations, they learn love through repeated emotional experiences. If a child grew up with emotional consistency, care that feels predictable, repair after conflict, or warmth that returns reliably, their nervous system learns connection is safe, distance is temporary, silence does not automatically mean rejection. I can survive uncertainty. But what if that wasn't your experience? What if love was inconsistent? Warm one day, cold next. Available sometimes, emotionally absent at other times. What if affection dependent on mood, performance, compliances, emotional inavailability? Then your nervous system may have learned something entirely different. It may have learned watch carefully. Notice every shift. Something can change suddenly. You may need to work to restore connection. And this is not weakness, this is adaptation. Beautiful, painful adaptation. I remember a client once said something that stayed with me. She said, I don't think I'm needy, I just panic when people change. That sentence holds so much truth. I ask, what does change mean emotionally here? She thought for a while, then whispered, loss, abandonment, being left emotionally alone. And then the deeper story emerged. As a child, her father was affectionate, unpredictably. Some evenings playful, some evenings emotionally unavailable, some evenings critical. Same person, different emotional worlds. And what did little her, her learn? Scan, predict, monitor, adjust. Children are astonishing pattern detectors. Not because they are anxious by nature, but because they are trying to stay connected. This is about attachment and anxious attachment. I mean, let's talk about anxious attachment and let's make it this human, not textbook kind of thing. Because anxious attachment does not simply mean clingy. That word is often deeply unfair. What anxious attachment often means is connection feels emotionally uncertain. And when connection feels uncertain, the nervous system mobilizes. Hypervigilance, checking, reassurance seeking, or overthinking, or emotional intensity. Because the psyche is trying to answer one essential question: am I still emotionally safe with you? That's the real question underneath many behavior. Not why didn't you reply, but do I still matter? Or not, are you upset? But am I losing connection? And not did something change, but am I about to be emotionally abandoned? So when we land this, there's often enormous relief because suddenly our behavior makes sense. Because anxious attachment sounds like they said they are busy, but what if they are actually upset? Or maybe I know I already asked, but I just need to be sure. Or they seem different today, I hate that I care this much. Or I feel embarrassed, needing reassurance. So, and perhaps the most painful, I know I'm exhausting people. That one breaks my heart because underneath that sentence is often someone who learned emotionally safe was fragile. When people hear abandonment, they often imagine obvious abandonment, a parent's leaving, divorce, physical absence, but emotional abandonment can be quieter, harder to name, and equally powerful. A caregiver physically present but emotionally unreachable. a parent who dismissed feeling, a home where distress was inconvenient, a household where emotional need felt burdensome. Being told, like, stop crying, or you're too sensitive, nothing happened, what are you making a big deal? Or perhaps the most psychologically confusing, affection mixed with unpredictability. This creates emotional ambiguity. And ambiguity is fragile ground for adult anxiety because part of you learns I cannot relax fully. I once worked with a man who repeatedly asked his partner, are you sure you love me? And he hated that he did this. He felt ashamed. He kept saying, I sound ridiculous. Eventually, I asked, growing up, when did you feel most uncertain emotionally? He laughed softly, that kind of laugh people do when pain is familiar. Then said, my mother loved me, but only when she wasn't overwhelmed. That sentence says everything. Love existed, but availability was inconsistent. That creates a confusing emotional blueprint because the child learns love exists, but it may disappear. So the adult seeks repeated confirmation, not because they are irrational, but because old uncertainty never fully resolved. Let's try to address something that frustrates so many people. Why do tiny things affect me this much? Because emotionally, tiny things are always tiny. A shorter message, a delayed reply, a distracted tone, or a quieter partner, or a missed call, someone seeing off, objectively small or psychologically potential signals, especially for hypervigilant nervous system. Hypervigilance means here your mind and body are scanning for threat, not because you enjoy anxiety, but because your system learned vigilance help prevent pain. And here is what's make this exhausting. Hypervigilance is often excellent at noticing changes, but at accurately interpreting meaning. That distinctions matter because noticing they replied differently may be true, concluding the relationship is at risk may not be, but emotionally those can feel identical. Because the anxious brain often confuses uncertainty with danger, difference with rejection, and distance with abandonment, silence with punishment. That's why reassurance becomes so selective because reassurance briefly restores certainty. Sometimes reassurance seeking is not entirely your adult self is speaking. Sometimes it is younger emotional part. The younger self who once needed predictability, the younger self who needed emotional clarity, the younger self who worked hard to maintain connection, and the younger self who believed if I can understand what changed, maybe I can fix it. This is why some adults sound surprisingly young internally during anxiety. Please tell me we are okay. Please don't be upset or please reassure me. This isn't weakness. That may be an unsoothed younger emotional state becoming activated. And therapy often helps people recognize this panic is older than today. And that awareness can be profoundly healing. Think that why you may feel too much. So many people say this that I'm too much. Let me say something important here. Needing reassurance does not automatically mean you are too much. The real question are how often, how intensely, what emotional cost, and what is the unmet need underneath. Because there is a difference between healthy relational reassurance and chronic anxiety driven reassurance dependency. One is human and the other becomes exhausting. Let's talk about the part nobody says out loud. Reassurance works. That's why people keep seeking it. If reassurance didn't create relief, this pattern would become so sticky. Imagine this: you feel anxious, your mind is racing, your chest feels tight, a relationship feels uncertain. You ask, "Are you upset with me?" And the another person said, "No, not at all." And instantly, your body softens, your breathing changes, your thoughts slow. Relief. Now, psychologically, something important just happened. Your nervous system learned. Asking reduces distress, and the brain love relief. The brain remembers relief. This is basic learning psychology. When a behavior reduces discomfort, the brain says, "Do that again." So, next time anxiety appears, you seek assurance faster, then sooner, until sometimes the actual issue matter less than the relief mechanism itself. This is how reassurance become emotionally addictive. Not because you enjoy dependency, but your nervous system learned a shortcut. A client once said something beautifully honest. He said, "I know asking doesn't actually solve anything, but for 10 minutes, I feel normal again." Exactly. That 10-minute matters because intermittent relief creates powerful behavioral reinforcement. That same mechanism behind many repetitive coping loops. And then she said, "But why does the anxiety come back?" Because reassurance treats uncertainty temporarily. It does not build tolerance for uncertainty. That distinction changes everything. Anxiety loop. And let's make this clinically clear. This is often a cycle. Trigger, then uncertainty, which leads to anxiety, which leads to catastrophic thought, which leads to need for reassurance, which leads to temporary relief, that leads to return for of certainty, and then repeat. For example, your partner is quieter than usual. Your mind notices. Uncertainty appears. Then something happens. Anxiety rises. Your body activates. Your mind begins generating explanations. Maybe they are upset. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe something has changed. Then you ask a reassurance. "Are we okay?" They say yes, yes. Relief. But then later, what if the only said yes because they didn't want conflict, and the cycle begin again. This is why reassurance seeking can become relentless, not because the person is irrational, but because anxiety is intolerant of incomplete certainty. Now, there is another aspect also where overthinking often gets misunderstood. People think overthinking is simply excessive thought, but psychologically, overthinking is often an attempt to create emotional control. If I analyze enough, maybe I can prevent pain. If I understand every detail, maybe I won't be blindsided. If I replay the conversation, maybe I'll find the answer. It feels productive. It feels intelligent. It feels like problem solving, but emotionally, it is often fear in analytical clothing. Making sound like maybe I should review exactly what I said, or let me check their tone, or maybe I missed something subtle, or let me compare old messages, or was their energy different, or did I seem annoying? And the mind says, investigate. But the nervous system is actually saying, protect me. Let's go a little deeper clinically. Not everyone who seeks reassurance has OCD. At times, we try to relate these things with OCD, like I'm using, we're talking about anxiety and all those things. So, in the same way, but some reassurance pattern overlap strongly with obsessive compulsive mechanism because OCD is fundamentally about distress plus uncertainty, plus compulsion, plus temporary relief. Sound familiar? Exam, something like this that, "Are you sure I locked the door?" Or did I offend them? Or what if I said something inappropriate? Or can you promise nothing is wrong? Or something like that. The key feature isn't the question itself, but the inability to settle internally, the need for repeated certainty, because uncertainty feels unbearable. Healthy reassurance is occasional, contextual, emotionally proportional, revolves naturally, and compulsive reassurance is repetitive, urgent, difficult to resist, and relief fades quickly, and return is stronger. I mean, returns are stronger, and that distinctions matter clinically here, because sometimes the what looks relational is actually anxiety maintenance. Let's touch something deeply tender. Sometimes reassurance isn't about fear something is wrong. Sometimes reassurance is about needing confirmation that you're okay, that you matter, that you're loved, disappoint, that you haven't become too much. And this often happens when self worth was built externally, when approval meant safety, praise meant belonging, and acceptance felt conditional. Then adult relationship become emotional mirror, and the question becomes, tell me who I am. A client once said, if someone I love seems distant, I suddenly feel less valuable. That sentence deserves attention, because distance become identity, not just circumstances. I asked, what did emotional distance first feel like, a verdict about your worth? There were tears. Then he said, my childhood. And that's often the doorway. There is also emotional dependency versus kind of human needs. And this is where nuance matters, because many people become ashamed and swing to the opposite extreme. I should need nobody. This is not psychological health. Human needs connection. Human need reassurance sometimes. Human need emotional co-regulation. The goal is not emotional isolation. The goal is flexibility. The difference is this: healthy connection says, I value reassurance, but I can survive uncertainty. Dependency said, I cannot emotionally stabilize unless you reassure me. That's a very different psychological experience. Now let's talk about the relational reality, because repeated reassurance affects our relationship. Imagine being the partner. At first, you comfort, you reassure, you explain, you soothe, but over time, if the reassurance never sticks, the partner may feel helpless, frustrated, misunderstood, drained, or accused. They may think, why don't you trust me? But the anxious person may actually be saying, I don't trust uncertainty. That's not the same thing. And misunderstanding this creates painful relational conflict. One of the cruelest part of reassurance seeking is shame, because many people know they are doing it and judge themselves harshly. I'm exhausting, I'm needy, I'm broken. Why am I like this? And shame intensifies anxiety, which increases reassurance seeking, which creates more shame. And then there is another loop. And therapy often begins by interrupting that cruelty, because shame rarely has heals nervous system, fear understanding does. I've been listening and quietly thinking, this is me. I want to begin this final part by saying something very important. Patterns are not personalities. A coping strategy is not your identity, and reassurance seeking, however exhausting it may feel, is often not evidence that something is wrong with you. Very often, it is evidence that your emotional system found a way to survive uncertainty. The question now becomes, can survival evolve into security? And the answer is yes, but not by shaming yourself, not by pretending you don't care, not by becoming emotionally numb, not by forcing hyper independence. Healing is not becoming someone who needs nobody. Healing is becoming someone who can stay emotionally anchored even when uncertainty exists. That's very different. And one of the most powerful shift in therapy is learning to pause and ask, am I actually needing right now? I think in every session of mine, I really do this with everybody almost to whom I'm talking or to whom I talk. Because the conscious question may be, should I text them? But the deeper question might be, am I feeling abandoned? Am I scared? Do I feel unimportant? Is my nervous system activated? Is this about today or something older? And that pause changes everything because without awareness, we react automatically. With awareness, we gain choice. Reassurance seeking often begins in the nervous system, which means healing must include the body, not just thought correction. Here's what this can look like when anxiety spikes. Pause, notice what is happening physically. Chest tightens, racing thoughts, relentlessness, heat, nausea, shallow breathing. Then gently anchor, slow exhale, feet on the floor, relax the jaw, lengthen the breath, name the experience. My nervous system feels unsafe right now, not something is definitely wrong. That language really matters like everything here because one is awareness and the other is assumption. Important thing I think we need to know that what do we need to do in such moment, or maybe you can ask yourself, what do I know versus what am I imagining? Example, what I know is that they replied later than usual, and what I imagine that they are upset, they are losing interest, I have done something wrong. This creates psychological differentiation, a huge important skill. But I think there are, I mean, if we are going to create some sort of, I mean, building uncertainty tolerance, which is the another way, I think this is a major therapeutic goal. Because many reassurance patterns are really intolerance of uncertainty, and uncertainty is a part of every human relationship. No one can give perfect emotional certainty, not partners, not friends, not families, not therapists, not life. Healing means increasing your capacity to emotionally survive unanswered questions that may sound uncomfortable because it is. Growth often is. Instead of immediately asking, are you upset? Pause for 10 minutes, notice what happened, then 20, then longer over time, not as punishment, as nervous system training. You're teaching your brain anxiety can rise without immediate action. That is powerful because reassurance dependency weakens when emotional endurance grows. See one more aspect, the younger emotional self. Because if part of reassurance seeking come from older unmet needs, healing includes relational reparenting, meaning learning to offer yourself what was missing. That sounds abstract until it becomes deeply practical. Something like this, that instead of please tell me everything is okay, pause and ask, what does the younger part of me fear right now? Maybe being left, maybe being rejected, maybe being punished or forgotten, or maybe being unimportant. Then respond internally, I see your fear. This feeling makes sense. You're not alone. You can survive uncertainty. This is not childish. This is very sophisticated emotional healing. Sometimes reassurance is not about anxiety, it's about identity. Am I lovable? Do I matter? Am I enough? This is deeper work because no amount of repeated external reassurance permanently repair internal worth wounds. People can tell you you matter, I love you, you're enough, but if your internal architecture rejects it, the reassurance leaks out. This is why therapy often focus on core belief. Belief like I'm too much, I'm hard to love, or people leave, or I'm emotionally unsafe, or I cause disconnection. And these beliefs quietly shape adult relationship. Healing means challenging them. If you love someone who seeks reassurance, this part really matter. First, repeated reassurance seeking is exhausting. That reality matter too. matters too. Compassion should include both people, but understand, often the person is not trying to manipulate, they are trying to regulate distress. That changes the lens. And some other helpful responses are like that: I can see you are anxious. Help me understand what feels scary. Is this about reassurance or something deeper? And I care about you, and I also want us to build emotional security. Talk about like you are overreacting, stop being needy, and this again, they are the less helpful things because shame amplifies insecurity. However, support does not mean endlessly feeding compulsive cycle. That distinction matters here. And not all reassurance seeking is pathological. If someone has genuinely become inconsistent, withdrawn, cold, unfair, emotionally unavailable, asking for clarity is healthy. This is where self trust matter. The question is, am I responding to actual relational information or internal fear? Sometimes it's both. That's why discernment matter. Therapy doesn't simply teach people to stop asking. That would be superficial. Therapy helps people understand why uncertainty feels threatening, why attachment becomes activated, why hypervigilance developed, why certain relational cues trigger panics, why shame appears, why logic alone doesn't help. And slowly, therapy helps people internalize safety. That's the deeper goal, not perfect calm, internal security. So, if this episode felt deeply personal, if you found yourself thinking, how is she describing my exact mind? Here's what I want to leave you with. You're not broken, you're not weak, you're not too much. Your mind may simply be using an old strategy to protect you from emotional pain. And what protected you once maybe now be exhausting you. That doesn't make you flawed, it makes you human. And healing does not mean becoming someone who never feels fear. Healing means becoming someone who can hold fear without being ruled by it. Someone who can tolerate uncertainty. Someone who can ask for connection without to panic. Someone who can slowly become a safer home for themselves. And if no one has told you this lately, your emotional patterns make sense. 100% make sense. Even the ones you wish you didn't have. Thank you for spending this time with me today. This has been from the therapy room, psychology of mind and body. If this resonated with you, you can share what you felt or noticed. I would love to hear your reflection. And if this conversation felt like it was speaking directly to your inner world, please share this episode with someone who might quietly need it because so many people live inside this pattern silently. And if you enjoy psychologically deep therapy room style conversation around healing, relationship, trauma, anxiety, attachment, and emotional well being, follow the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music. I'll meet you in the next conversation. Take care gently. Until next time, take care of your mind, your body, and the quiet spaces within you. See you. I'll be sitting next besides to you. Take care.